Tibet has been occupied by the Chinese since the 1950s. The Chinese have had a very oppressive rule on Tibet, and some Tibetans have escaped through the Himalayas in order to preserve their culture, as many are unable to leave at will. Buddhism is something integral to Tibetan culture, in which through the certain principles, the goal is to end suffering and attain enlightenment. Enlightenment and mindfulness is something that is enhanced through the practice of meditation. Meditation and other spiritual rituals use what we would consider as musical instruments, but the purpose of them is generally for religious purposes. The use of sound energy can bring attention to the present moment. One of these instruments is the gong, which has been used historically to call monks when they need to meet up, and it is made of copper or bronze, and it is not struck but almost rubbed with the mallet, not hit like it is in some cultures. Although the Tibetan Buddhist music does not have a strong focus on rhythm as we would think of it in Western terms, there is a definite feeling of timing. So certain instruments that we could classify to be in the percussion layer would be, as I mentioned, the gong, and also there are chimes that are struck but do not change tone. Therefore, they can give some feeling of a rhythm. For example, the tingshas are two small cymbals that are used in prayer and rituals, and they are connected and struck together, and they play like high pitches, and they ring, and often made of bronze and also some leather. Sometimes wood or metal is struck. Again, it's not always very rhythmic in a Western feel. In the Buddhist Tibetan rituals, there are a couple of instruments that could be classified as aerophones. They are blown with the mouth on a mouthpiece, and air is blown through them, and that's how their sound is created. One example is Tibetan longhorn called the dunchen, which oftentimes more than one monk will be playing this, and it has kind of a whirring, deep sound that is often a part of other rituals and meditations. Another aerophone type instrument would be started off as some type of a conch, but it's called the dung dakar, and the context of this is banishing evil, and it's somewhat like a trumpet, although it has a limited range. And different sizes produce bigger, or a bigger size would produce a deeper sound, and a smaller dung dakar would produce higher pitch sound. But there is not, the notation used for chants is, I don't know a lot about. It's not a lot relating to pitch. This instrument can also be used for calling or getting the attention of monks in other monasteries, and also an offering to Buddha. The aspects of voice that are especially used by these monks are a type of chanting called overtone, because the vibrations are somehow manipulated by these monks, so they are creating 2 or sometimes 3 notes at a time. However, when they're chanting, all the monks will be chanting often the same words, but they are creating multiple notes, and this is really eerie sounding if you listen to it, but it can be relaxing too. Chanting is very important in the Tibetan form of Buddhism, and sometimes what you're saying is what is the most important, and sometimes it's just more of you're repeating syllables and achieving a certain mindset. There are texts called from the Vajrayana, which incorporates teachings from different schools of Buddhism, and sometimes the goal is transcendence. Another instrument I wanted to talk about, this would, I guess you could technically put this in the percussion layer, but, or, I don't know, possibly melody, because it has different pitches, but the singing bowl, and I'm actually playing singing bowls played together, like a meditation track over this recording, if you can hear it, just because I find the sound of it so fascinating. The use of this is to clear the air and settle the mind, and they're made from different metals, and one unique aspect of this is also it has an overtone, which can be a tritone, which would be the first note of a typical scale sequence, and then the augmented fourth or flat octave. That would be a tritone. These are known as a standing bell, and one interesting use for them that I found was Buddhists will make an offering using a water offering using these bowls. They'll use 7 bowls, and they will set up the bowls on a shrine, and some of the purpose or meaning behind this is that water, something free and plentiful, and that's like the gifts that you would want to cultivate the spirit of giving being something done freely and easily. So the singing bowl can be played either by being struck or a type of hammer run around the brim in a circular pattern, and the speed of this will affect the tone, and the energy of this is kind of has some connections to being healing, or at least I mean, definitely listening to it has a very peaceful effect, if not healing. So the history of these bowls is actually somewhat mysterious. They are were made throughout Asia, Nepal, China, and Japan specifically. And there are a certain amount of original singing bowls that exist, and they were often like handmade with mixed metals, and that was important for the sound of them. But the actual origination of the singing bowls is not from Tibet, and it's kind of like some type of mystery in that. But anyway, I just wanted to finish up with a quote from Lama Aga, who is one of these Tibetan monks that I mentioned earlier, who escaped through the Himalayas, actually on foot, because he couldn't get a permit out. And one thing he said is, religion is food for the mind. To understand the profound and higher practices, one has to give up one's present life and go study. And this just relates to the fact that the Tibetan Buddhist idea of music isn't so much for the appreciation of music, but it's for the deeper search of spirituality. And therefore, a lot of the purposes of their instruments is for ritual and meditation and prayer uses, rather than for pure enjoyment. And the life of these monks is very different. I watched some videos, and they spend many hours a day meditating and chanting and performing these rituals together, and it's quite incredible to see. So basically, to summarize some of the stuff that I've learned with the Tibetan Buddhist music, the focus is either on unified words, sometimes multiple pitches, but not getting too crazy there. And a lot of their instruments don't have a lot of range, but in that way they're useful because they're not distracting. They are good for the focus and meditation. And to summarize, the Tibetan Buddhist music culture is very, very fascinating. It definitely has some spiritual ideas to consider if you are into